English made easy. Hey guys! Bored of those vocab lists? Me too. At 1 Degree North Companion, we're turning wordly wise into an adventure to make learning actually interesting. Let's jump in.
Let me tell you a story. It's about how a few charcoal drawings, seen completely in secret, ended up launching the career of one of America's all-time greatest artists. This is a story about ambition, about love, and about a partnership that would absolutely change the course of art history. So picture this. The year is 1916. Forget the legend you know. We're talking about Georgia O'Keeffe, an unknown art teacher way out in Texas. She rolls up some of her new, deeply personal drawings, sends them to a friend in New York, and gives her one very strict command: do not show these to anyone. And this quote really gets to the heart of where she was at. She had poured her entire soul into these abstract charcoal shapes, but she was terrified they were worthless. The idea of strangers belittling them, just dismissing them as nothing, was something she just couldn't bear.
Well, luckily for all of us, her friend saw the genius in those drawings. She completely disregarded the order and took them straight to the one man who mattered in the New York art scene, Alfred Stieglitz, the owner of a groundbreaking gallery known simply as 291.
And that one single act of friendly disobedience was, in a word, fateful. It was a decision with such huge, momentous consequences that it didn't just change 2 lives, it would completely shake up the entire future of American art. But who was this guy, Alfred Stieglitz, who suddenly held her entire future in his hands? To really get O'Keeffe's incredible rise, you first have to understand the stage he had already built. Stieglitz wasn't just a gallery owner, he was a giant. He was the celebrated photographer who was fighting to get the medium seen as real art, at a time when most people thought it was just, a technical recording. His gallery, 291, was like a beachhead for European modernism. He was the one introducing a very skeptical America to the shocking, radical work of artists like Picasso and Matisse. He was, for sure, the ultimate tastemaker. And his secret weapon in this whole fight was a magazine called Camera Work. Now, this was no ordinary journal. It was sumptuously printed. Think of the most luxurious, perfectly curated Instagram feed of a high-end brand you can imagine. That was Camera Work. It was rich, magnificent, and designed from the ground up to prove that a photograph could be just as powerful as any painting. So Stieglitz sees these drawings, he's blown away, and he does something completely unthinkable. He puts them up on his gallery walls without ever asking her. Imagine O'Keeffe's shock. She's visiting New York, walks into this famous gallery, and sees her most private, vulnerable creations hanging there for the entire world to judge. She was, and you can't blame her, absolutely furious. So she storms into 291 to expostulate with him, to protest, to reason with him, to demand he take her private art down immediately. But Stieglitz, he didn't budge. He famously told her, "You have no right to withhold your genius." Now, you'd think that confrontation would be the end of the story, right? Actually, it was the explosive beginning of one of the art world's most passionate and, complicated relationships. So when O'Keeffe went back to Texas, an unbelievably intense correspondence started. Their letters, which at first were just about art, pretty soon grew more and more amorous. They wrote with this incredible passion, sometimes sending as many as 5 letters back and forth in a single day. O'Keeffe herself described the powerful, almost overwhelming effect of his words. You could just feel it here. His letters were like this force of nature in her life, a sign of the powerful connection they were building, even hundreds of miles apart. But of course, there was one huge problem. Stieglitz was married. Now, his marriage was moribund. It was basically on life support, close to death. In the early 20th century, though, that little detail didn't matter. An affair like theirs was a huge scandal, and it invited some serious social backlash. And that backlash had real, devastating consequences. His wife's wealthy family cut off all the money he used to fund his artistic projects. His revolutionary gallery had to close. His sumptuous magazine, Camera Work, stopped publishing. For his art and for his new love, he was basically left broke. But then came the comeback. In 1921, Stieglitz holds this triumphant exhibition. And the stars of the show? 45 stunning portraits of O'Keeffe. They were a total sensation. And for just one of those prints, he demanded a price that was just unheard of, $5,000. That price was, by any and every measure, exorbitant. It was way beyond what anyone thought was reasonable. But this was a masterclass in marketing. Stieglitz knew this exorbitant price wasn't really about the money. It was a statement. It instantly created this mystique around O'Keeffe and cemented her importance in the public's mind. And this right here shows you just how brilliant that move was. Back in the 1920s, the average American's yearly income was just a little over $1,200. That single photograph cost more than 4 times what most people earned in an entire year. So now she's a celebrity, she's financially secure, and O'Keeffe was finally free to create her own artistic vision. And that vision pulled her far away from the skyscrapers of New York and deep into the vast, soul-stirring landscapes of the American desert. O'Keeffe felt this powerful, undeniable pull to the stark, beautiful landscapes of the Southwest. It was here, out in the deserts of New Mexico, that she would find the inspiration for the work that would make her a true, undisputed icon. And it's in that landscape that she found her signature motifs. A motif is basically a recurring theme or idea in art. You can think of it like a trending hashtag that comes to define a creator's entire brand. These were the images that became totally synonymous with Georgia O'Keeffe. Her artistic motifs became legendary. Those huge flowers, so big they become abstract worlds of their own. And of course, the sun-bleached animal skulls she found in the desert. But here's the thing. For O'Keeffe, those skulls were never about death. They were symbols of the desert's eternal, enduring spirit, pure form. It really makes you stop and think, doesn't it? Stieglitz used his wife's family money to subsidize these artists that nobody else believed in. Without that crucial early investment in risky, groundbreaking art, what would American modernism even look like today? So after all the drama, the passion, and the incredible art, what's their final legacy? How does history now look back on this artistic power couple? Well, here's the final verdict. While Stieglitz was absolutely the catalyst, the guy who built the stage and aimed the spotlight, history now deems O'Keeffe the greater, more enduring artistic force. He was the kingmaker, but she became the legend. And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. Imagine you have to fight for an artist that everyone has belittled. How would you argue for a subsidy? Could you convince them that a seemingly exorbitant investment right now could have a fateful impact on our culture, and that to ignore this artist's unique motif would be a tragedy? It's a challenge that every champion of new art has to face, then and now.
Hope you guys enjoyed that last lesson. If you did, smash that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell. Ready for more? The next one starts right now.
Today, we're going to talk about a man who was so much more than just a sports hero. He was a thinker, a fighter, a true gentleman whose impact, it stretched way beyond the tennis court. We're talking about the incredible Arthur Ashe. All right, I want you to picture this scene. It's February 6th, 1993, Madison Square Garden. The place is electric, just packed with boxing fans, and the roar is absolutely deafening. And then an announcement cuts through all that noise. And just like that, the whole place goes quiet. Absolute, profound silence. So what could possibly silence a whole arena like that? Well, the news was that Arthur Ashe had died. Now think about that for a second. A tennis champion's death brings a boxing match to a dead halt. That's incredible. And it just begs the question, right? Why? Why did his passing hit so hard, way beyond the world of sports, all across the globe? To really get that, we have to go back to the very beginning of his story. So let's go back. Arthur Ashe was born in 1943, right in the heart of segregated Richmond, Virginia. I mean, this was a time and a place that was just completely torn apart by race. But even in a world determined to hold him back, his talent was something no one could ignore. He was a true prodigy. And when I say prodigy, I mean the real deal. He picks up a tennis racket for the first time when he's just 7 years old, learning on these segregated courts where his dad was a caretaker. And by the time he's 10, his talent is so raw, so obvious, that a coach just had to take him on. He saw that spark. But all the talent in the world couldn't protect him from the ugly reality of his time. Can you imagine? At 13 years old, he's told he can't play in a tournament in his own hometown. And the reason? The color of his skin. That's it. What a brutal, painful message for a kid to get. This wasn't just some simple rejection. This was an affront, a calculated insult, aimed right at his dignity as a person. And sadly, it wasn't going to be the last time. But every one of these affronts, They just added fuel to this quiet fire that was building inside him, a fire that would power a lifelong crusade. And as he started climbing the ranks of the tennis world, something really interesting happened. People started noticing not just how he played, but who he was. He got this amazing nickname, the thinking man's champion. And what's so cool about that is his demeanor on the court. You have to remember, this was the era of guys like Jimmy Connors and Ilie Nastase, the hotheads, the guys throwing their rackets. And then there's Ash. He was just a picture of cool, calm composure. And that wasn't an accident. It was a choice. It was his secret weapon. His calm was this powerful, tacit statement. Tacit meaning it's understood without being said. He didn't have to yell or scream. His silence, his control, that was his response to their chaos. It was like this quiet message to everyone watching. Real strength, real power. It's not in the tantrum. It's in the control. But don't get it twisted. That calm exterior, it was hiding an absolutely ferocious competitor. Underneath it all, this guy was a brilliant warrior who could intimidate anyone with his power, and even more, with his intelligence. He was just so adroit. It's the perfect word for him. It means being really clever and skillful, especially when you're in a tough spot. And trust me, you can't get much tougher than the Wimbledon final in 1975. So he's up against the #1 player in the world, the powerhouse Jimmy Connors. And what does he do? He comes out with one of the most adroit, one of the smartest game plans in tennis history. He didn't try to outmuscle Connors, no way. He used his brain. He'd hit these soft, looping shots that just sucked all the power out of Connors' game. He'd change the spin, change the pace. He completely dismantled him. It was a masterpiece of strategy, brains beating brawn. And with that win, he became the first and only black man to ever win the Wimbledon singles title.
And yeah, Wimbledon was the big one, but his whole career was just stacked. He won the US Open, he won the Australian Open, he was ranked #1 in the world. This guy was, no question, one of the all-time greats.
But then, in 1980, a heart condition forces him to retire. And you might think, well, that's the end of the story. But you'd be wrong. This was the start of a whole new chapter for him, maybe an even more important one. He started calling himself a reluctant militant. Listen to this. From his own memoir, it tells you everything. He talks about seeing the violence of the civil rights movement while he was on the court in his immaculate whites. You can just feel the conflict he was wrestling with inside. This feeling, this guilt almost, it would really push him for the rest of his life.
And he took that energy and channeled it into becoming a scholar. I mean, we all saw the amazing athlete, but underneath was this incredibly erudite man, a truly learned intellectual. He was about to take on a project that was just massive.
He spent 6 years, researching and writing this huge 3-volume book called A Hard Road to Glory. And to this day, it's considered the definitive work on the history of African-American athletes, the final word. It proved his legacy was so much bigger than tennis. And that same drive lit a fire under his activism. He started this tireless crusade against apartheid in South Africa. He used his fame as a platform, as a weapon. And he wasn't just talking. He was on the front lines, getting arrested for protesting apartheid, for standing up for Haitian refugees. The quiet man of the court was now a loud, powerful voice for justice. And then came the final chapter of his life. He was faced with his toughest battle yet, and he faced it with that exact same grace, that same courage we saw on the tennis court. It's just such a cruel, heartbreaking story. A simple medical lapse. That's all it was. Back in 1983, during a heart surgery, he got a blood transfusion that was contaminated with HIV. Can you believe the irony? The very thing meant to save his life ended up being what would take it. And for years, he carried that knowledge, that burden, all by himself. But when it looked like the story was going to be forced out into the open, he did what he always did. He took control. He didn't hide, he didn't run. He stepped right into the storm. He decided to use his final years to fight the terrible stigma and fear around AIDS. He became one of the most important, most graceful advocates the cause ever had. And that brings us to the ultimate irony of his life story. You know the word pariah, right? It means an outcast, someone society pushes away. Just let that sink in for a second. The same young boy who was once treated like a pariah, who was told he wasn't good enough to play in his own city, that same man was brought back to that very city after he died to receive its highest possible honor. His body lay in state in the Virginia Capitol. He was the first African American ever to receive that honor. From pariah to hero, his journey had come full circle. You know, Arthur Ashe's life is such a powerful lesson. It shows us that an adroit mind can be way more powerful than brute strength, and that your demeanor, how you carry yourself, that's where your real strength lies. So I want to leave you with this. If you were going to start your own crusade for a cause you truly believe in, what would that vision be? See if you can describe it using 3 words from his story. Think about it. What will your legacy be?
Thanks so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed today's show. If you did, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss an update. I'll see you in the next one.